Okay, we are in Hilchas Talmud Torah 5:5, Halacha Hey in Perek Hey, continuing the subject of Kavod Rav, right? Honoring your Rebbe and the proper behavior. So we left off. Um, okay, so here we have an interesting halacha, one that we know for the most part. It says Va'asar lo letalmud likros larabo bishmo, vafilu shelo b'fanav. And could you imagine calling your Rebbe by his first name? All right, no one would ever do that, except in MTA. Anyways, that's it's a no-no, right? Like you don't call your father by his first name, you don't call your Rebbe by his first name, even when he's not there. You can't refer to him, right, by his first name. V'hushiyah Hashem. Hashem Peli Shakol Shema Yeda Shuhu Ploni. That's assuming that his name, like if you were to call out his name, everyone would know who you are referring to, and that's not respectable. So here's a weird situation. Let's say you were the group of people, and you have a friend named Shraga, and your Rebbe's name is Shraga, and you call it, "Hey, Shraga, come here." So even though you were referring to your friend Shraga and not your Rebbe, so still that shows how far we go, right? How far we go to distance from calling him by his first name because it is just not proper. Okay? And the same is true with your father, right? If you're with a bunch of people, right, and you call out your friend who has the same name as your father's first name, then that's also a problem. It's even a problem if your father's name is Abba, right? I think the Gemara in Kedushin talks about that. Okay, Elishana eshma mafil lachar mosan. You have to um, change, right? You should refer to your friend as a different name. Okay, even after your Rebbe dies, you can't call your friend by the first name that used to be your Rebbe's name. So that's how far we go in extending this. You can't say, "Hey, what's up?" Right? You can't even greet your Rebbe like the way you greet your friends, right? With a "what's up," right? Not a good idea. You have to go to him with humility and bow down to him. Shocha means to like lower your head a little bit, kind of like the way they do in Korea, right? When you greet someone. But you have to have awe and respect, and you say Shalom Alecha Rebbe, right? That's the magic word. V'imnasano Rebbe Shalom Yachzelo Shalom Alecha Rebbe Mori. And if the teacher greeted him, if the Rebbe greets you, you should say Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori, right? This became famous by what we call Toch Kedei Dibur, right? How long does it take? How long does halacha recognize, without getting into the details of the Ran and Nedarim, where he talks about the time increment of Chazal is not a second or a millisecond. It's the Shalom Alecha Rebbe. That's why you have a certain amount of time. If it takes 1.5 seconds to do Chazara when you say something, right? So the standard has become how long it takes to say Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori. Okay. Okay, we're on to the next halacha, halacha vav. V'chen lo yachlot tefillin lifnei Rebbe, lifnei Rabo, right? You can't take off your tefillin, right, in the presence of your Rebbe. It's not respectful. Velo yasev ela yoshev ki yoshev lifnei hamelech. Right? You shouldn't do heseba, right? Like we do at a seder. You can't lean down. You can't stretch out, right? If your Rebbe's there, you can't just lie out on a couch, right? Not respectable. Not respected. V'lo yispalel lo lifnei rabbo v'lo la'achar rabbo v'lo etzad rabbo. When it comes to davening, okay, you can't daven either in front of him, behind him, or at his side. So what's left? It's a good question. I'm not sure. I guess you can't be near him. Okay. Ella, excuse me, the ein tzarach lomer she'aslo lahalach betzido. And when you're walking with him, you can't be next to him because it shows like you're almost equal to him. Ella yisrachak lacharabo, but stay far back. V'lo yehem echaven keneged achora v'achar kach yispalel. Right, staying back of him and getting back to davening. So you should, stand a while back from him, without standing directly behind him. Okay, and then you should daven. So it's almost like, like the way a horse moves in chest, right? You go two and then one over, right? Okay. Below yichanes im rabo b'merchatz. Whoa, I'm not going to touch that one. Below yeshev b'mkom rabo, and you can't sit where your Rebbe sits. Again, all of these should ring a bell from Kibud Ava'im, right? Remember how yesterday or the day before we extended that it's even more severe, right? The cover we have to show our Rebbe is even more than our parents, right? Again, assuming that it's your Rebbe Muvhak and it fits all the criteria. So yeah, you can't sit in his place. You can't either contradict him or you can't agree with him, right? Because it's just like if your father's in a discussion with someone, right? And this is Hilchos Kibbud Ava'im. We'll get to it, in I don't know, like 17 years, because it's, I think, all the way at the end of the Yad HaChazakah. So at this rate, it'll be a long time. But anyways, if and when we get to it, it talks about how if your father's having let's say, a debate with someone, so you have to stay out of it. You can't either agree or disagree. You can't disagree because that's obvious. But if you agree with your father, it looks like he needs you. So you're helping him out. So you're weakening him by showing yourself off. So that's why it's best to just, stay away. If your father's having a debate with someone, or if your Rebbe is having a debate with someone. And you can't sit in front of your Rebbe until he directs you to sit. Until he says stand up, unless you get permission. It's like, you ever see people how they leave the kotel, right? They walk backwards. So believe it or not, that is the recommended way. When you leave your Rebbe, you can't turn your back on him, but you should walk backwards while you could still see him. So, that's it's a lot of stuff that's very difficult to, because again, this is like, Chinese to us today. Because we don't have relationships with our Rebbeim, where we're like considered a Talmud Mufak or a Rebbe Mufak, and you hang out with him the whole day, and like a high school Rebbe or even a yeshiva Rebbe in Israel is not this kind of relationship. So that's why it's very foreign for us to understand. But yeah, once upon a time, they took it very seriously. Okay, we discussed that already. Number 7, Zayin v'chayav lamod b'fnei rabba shirei marachok. And if you're sitting down and you see in the corner of your eye from a half a mile away your Rebbe coming, you got to stand up right away. Ad sheyitkasem mimenu v'lo yira kol masa v'achakach yeshev. Right? And then if you see that he passes, he's gone from your vision and he can't be seen, then you could sit down. That's how far we extend this. This is a famous halacha that the Rambam, interestingly, just sticks at the end of this halacha, which doesn't really seem to jive with the beginning of the halacha about standing, right? But nevertheless, this is a Gemara. It'll take me a second to remember where it comes from, but we learn from the story of Elisha, I think, where it says lo Shabbat, lo regel, right? A pasuk in Malachim, I think. I think it's in Moed Katan now that I'm thinking about it, where it says that there's a special halacha or mitzvah that in the Gemara it's called Shabbos de Rigla, or I forgot the expression exactly at this moment, but you would go to your yeshiva 3 times a year on the Shalosh Regalim and Shabbos Kala, is that what they call it? Right. Anyways, that's what they have now, and that's what they did then. Right? You got to greet him at least 3 times a year. It's a chiyuv. It's not just a nice thing. You have to. Okay, number 8. Ein cholkin kavod l'talmud mipnei rabo. So here's an interesting halacha. Let's say the Rebbe and the Talmud are sitting down, and someone else comes by and starts to give kavod to the Talmud while his Rebbe is still there. So that's a no-no. Unless this is a Talmud of epic proportions, and the Rebbe himself shows respect to the Talmud, then that's an exception. But if he's a regular person, then you can't do that because you're kind of like showing up the Rebbe. Right? We know that there are many. Gemara talks about, I think in Gittin, various malachos that the Eved has to do for his master. He'd put his shoes on, and he'd get his clothing on, and he'd make him eggs. Right? All the things that a servant does for his master, believe it or not, that is what a Talmud should do for his Rebbe. And if the Talmud was in a place where, let's say, no one knew who he was, and he didn't have tefillin, right? If he was in a place where no one knew who he was, and he wasn't wearing his tefillin, so if he would think that people might actually call him an Eved, right, then he doesn't have to take on and off his Rebbe's shoes, because people might think he's actually an Eved, right? So, that's the risk you run by doing, jobs or services for someone else, and someone's going to say, oh, I don't know who that is. It looks like he's a servant. That's not a good thing for people to think about you. And the Rambam ends off by saying that if you're a Rebbe and you're a really, really nice guy, and you're like, I don't want to make my student do all my work for me. I could get dressed myself. I could make breakfast myself. Why do I want to have my students, my Talmud, make breakfast for me? So believe it or not, the Rambam says you have to let him do it. Why? Because what you're doing is you're taking away an opportunity for the Talmud to do a mitzvah. So you, by being a nice guy, are kind of letting this mitzvah slip away from the Talmud to show you respect. Monea mimenu chesed, uporak mimenu yiras shamayim, and you're taking away the fear of heaven from him. B'chol Talmud shemizalzal davar mipnei kavod rabo, and any Talmud, right, who's very, very lax, right, when it comes to all of these halachas that we're talking about, right, and about honoring his Rebbe, Gorim l'shchina shetistalak mi Yisrael. Wow, right? It's a pretty bad curse, right? You cause the Shechina to depart from the Jewish people, right? That's really, really difficult. I was going to link this whole discussion about kavod for your Rebbe, and you know, I'm actually going to save that for a different night. Okay, we are. Oh, time to go. Okay, we will.